and empower. A lifestyle change. Developing discipline. Triathlon training. 75 hard. The personal trainer experience.
All right, welcome to the Mom Bod Pod. Today we are going to be discussing women's sports, kids working out in terms of like a more gym-based setting, and different types of training programs that you can follow for your own types of workouts. So let's jump into it. First, we're going to talk about women's sports. So it is no secret that women professional athletes make a lot less than men professional athletes. So let's talk though about the one sport where men and women actually make the same amount of money depending on how they perform. And this sport is tennis. So tennis is one of the only sports out there where there is equal pay between men and women. Some of the highest paid female athletes actually play tennis. Number one, Naomi Osaka and Serena Williams are two of the highest paid female athletes, specifically tennis playing athletes. Some other industries or fitness-based fields, sportings that are female dominant would be gymnastics, cheerleading, and figure skating. So those are other sports out there that have a predominantly female base to them, and therefore females make more money generally than men in that aspect. So I am based out of Kansas City, so let's talk about some of the women's sporting teams that are local to Kansas City. First off, we've got Kansas City Current, which is a soccer team. So Kansas City Current is actually the first women's soccer team to ever have their own designated stadium just to their team. So a lot of other teams, especially in women's sports, they rent out different arenas, different playing fields for their practices, for their games and whatnot. But the Kansas City Current is the first ever women's soccer team to have their own stadium. So I think that's awesome that as Kansas City, we get to say that. So number two, the Kansas City Glory, which is a women's football team. Right now, they are set to win the 2022 conference, so I think that's pretty awesome. We also have another women's football team, Kansas City Storm. So I did not know that women's football was a professional league that we had. So that was something that was super, super interesting to learn about, as well as that there's multiple Kansas City teams. I did a little bit of looking over their Instagram page, and let me tell you, they look like beasts, okay? They look awesome. So let's talk a little bit more into salaries. The average women's NBA player makes about $120,000 a year. And of the entire women's NBA league, there are only 4 players who are currently making over $200,000. Only 4, okay? Only 4. Then let's see. So I'm a big women's sport player. Growing up, I played soccer, I played softball and basketball, and I did all 3 of those, I think since I was like 4 until beginning of high school. And I did those all year round. A lot of the times I would do dual sport, so I would play for a school, and then I would play for my private club as well. So it was like all year round, 2-a-days pretty much all the time growing up. You know, you went to basketball practice in the morning and then you had softball practice in the evening. So, you know, I got burnt out pretty quickly, especially once I got to high school. And I was just kind of like, you know what? I'm done. I'm burnt out. These sports are no longer fun, interesting. I'm not liking this anymore. Like, it went negative for me. So then I still enjoyed being active. I was a super naturally competitive person. So I switched it up a little bit and I joined the tennis team. Now, I knew absolutely nothing about tennis. And I kind of thought, you know, I'm going to hit this ball as hard as possible and I'm going to be able to win, because that's kind of what I did with all my other sports. You know, I just went balls to the walls and I was good. But tennis kind of taught me that I need to kind of tame it back. And instead, tennis was more about technique and a mental sport than all the other sports that I had been playing. So my very first year, I was absolutely awful. I mean, it was horrible. I remember our tennis courts were surrounded by cornfields. And so if you kind of hit the ball a little bit too hard, you were running in the cornfield looking for your tennis ball. Like, that was. And my first year playing tennis, me and that cornfield got very, very familiar, okay? I had like the mazes. You could see my trail in the corn maze. Like, it was rough. Then I practiced all summer long. I tried to get better at my serving. I tried to get better at my overhand, underhand, my loops, everything. So second year came around and I was able to make the varsity team as well as the A team. So basically what you did whenever you went to a tennis tournament, you had your A team and you had your B team, and you had singles and you had doubles. And I actually practiced a lot to where I made the A doubles team. So I had one of my partners, she was a senior. We did really, really good. That first year, we actually made it to the top 6 of our region that we did. So we did really, really well. And it was super, super fun. I loved it. Then my senior year, I went back to tennis, and I didn't have as good of a year that year, but I really loved tennis. It was like the first sport that I enjoyed doing. And I feel like it was because it wasn't just a balls to the walls type of thing. It challenged me more. It made me focus more. It made me really think the sport through. And that's why I think that sports are super important for children, especially growing up, because there's a lot of things that they benefit. They benefit that mental ability to kind of work through, but they're also really good for things like motor sport skills, developing your coordination. As a personal trainer, I would be lying if I said it was very clear whenever I could tell someone who had done some type of sport activity before and someone who had never done one before. And it was mostly based on their coordination in terms of being able to kind of coordinate their bodies and whatnot. And so I think that it's really good to try to get into some type of sport, any type of sport, volleyball, track, swimming, cheer, any type of sport where you're in a team-based environment and you're trying to develop that physical drive and that competition, that plays into a lot of things in adulthood. And that's why I think it's super, super great to try to get into sports at a young age. All right, next we're going to discuss when is a good age to start introducing either sports or physical exercise like strength training to a child. Now, sporting events, I remember 3-on-3 soccer started about age 4 or 5. You also have things like gymnastics and tumbling that I don't actually remember, but I've seen pictures of before I was 2. My mom used to take me to dance classes and she tried to get me into gymnastics. So that was the youngest I started doing some type of physical activity, anywhere between 1 and 2. Now, in terms of strength training, like teaching your child how to work out themselves, take care of their physical health, strength training and things like that can be educated and taught to a child anywhere between 7 and 8. Really, you just need to make sure that they can kind of understand what they're being taught. That's kind of the key point of why it's 7 to 8. And that's a really good time when you can start introducing more competitive sports to children because they start being able to retain that information more. So one thing, whenever though you are getting a child into sports, I really want to stress to parents that it's super important that you're pushing your child to do it because they want to do it, because of all the benefits that come with sports, but not so much as because you really liked that sport. If it comes to the point where they don't enjoy the sport and you're just continuously forcing them to do it, that over a long period of time creates a negative kind of effect in terms of how that child views physical exercise and sporting as well. And so that can actually play a negative impact in terms of their long-term health because they then develop this hate for it. So it's really important that you really prevent your children from developing burnout at that young age. I would say if you are balancing more than 3 sports at a time, that's a lot for a kid to handle. So that's why I'm really, really happy for my tennis because that sparked a light in me and saying that, okay, you know what? It was just too much. You got burnt out there, but it wasn't a negative relationship with being physical and taking care of your physical health in sports. It was just that in the way that you were doing it. So that's super, super important. Don't let your kiddos get burned out at a young age. Push them to do sports because they want to do sports and it's good for them. Don't push them because it's what you wanted. Now we're going to talk about the 7 methods that come with training. So these are 7 different training methods that you can use to program your workouts. And some people like certain ones, and some people this is like not for them. As a personal trainer, I think it's important to always stay a student and always change it up to pique your interest. So I like some days doing one style of training method and another day doing another one. Okay, so you kind of hit a little bit of everything. If you just stick to one type of training method and you only ever do that, you're not being a well-rounded athlete. So those people who really like just weight training, they only like lifting weights, and that's all they go into the gym to do, that's super, super good. But guess what? You also need cardio, okay? You need that continuous training. Your heart is a muscle as well, and so that's just as important. So I think it's good to stay a student, try all different types of training methods. So let's jump into it. I talked about that continuous training. So that is where you maintain your heart at a desired level over a long period of time. So things like running, swimming, triathlon, something that's over a long period of time. Number 2, fartlek training. So this is going to be a period of exercise that involves resting and then high and low intensities. So my example would be a Tabata. So Tabatas mean that you exercise for 20 seconds, you rest for 10, you move on to your next exercise it for 20 seconds, rest for 10. So you're going back and forth, back and forth. And how you program those is you can actually program where like the first one targeted your glutes, the second one's targeting your hamstrings, third one's targeting your glutes, fourth one's targeting your hamstrings. Another one could be like you are doing interval sprints. So you are sprinting for 30 seconds, walking for a minute, jogging for 3 minutes, and you would repeat that 5 times. So that's another example. Number 3, we've got circuit training. So these are going to be something where you're doing like different stations. You're completing something at one, you move to the next one, next one, next one, next one, and you're just trying to run through those as fast as possible. So this can be super helpful if you're someone who gets kind of bored with doing the same thing, because circuit training allows you to fit a lot of different moves in there in a short amount of time. And if the trainer develops that program properly, you're also hitting that cardio factor because you're moving consistently and you're being able to get that heart rate up, and in that process of moving to that next station, your heart rate has a little bit of time to recover. So it can kind of work depending on how you program it. A circuit training can also kind of be like a continuous training as well, that first one we talked about. Then let's talk about weight training. So that's what I said, when those people want to go to the gym, they just want to lift super, super heavy weights. Strength training, weight training is super important as well. So this could be using weights, dumbbells, barbells, anything like that, but this is also using resistant bands. So you program it based off of your 1 rep max. Whenever you're doing a weight training type program, your 1 rep max is going to be super important in order to know how to push you. Instead of just going to the gym and saying, oh, I'm going to lift something heavy, well, that may not be the actual amount that you needed in order to continuously progress like you need to. So your 1 rep max is something that you can do 1 full rep at the max amount, so only 1. So it's going to be super, super heavy. Then you're also breaking those up into sets and reps in terms of your programming. So say I'm going to do 3 sets of 8 reps. So I'm going to do 8 reps, take a little bit of break, another 8 reps, a little bit of break, my last 8 reps, and that's going to be my total of 3 sets. So that's how you would program that. Then let's talk about interval training. So exercise for periods of time with rest. Like that Tabata that I talked about, where it's like a short period of time and then you're resting, exercise for a little bit more. But this could also be something in terms of like 1 minute burnouts, 30 seconds that you're going at. So any like interval time where you're doing your move, boom, you move to the next move, boom, you move to the next move, back and forth, back and forth. And what I would suggest doing is antagonist muscle groups and then your protagonist. So you're kind of working them back and forth. That's going to be your supersets. Then let's talk about polymetric training. So this is going to be short bursts of high intensity exercises or stretches as well. So plyo lunges are something that I'm really big on. So you're lunging and you're jumping up, you're exploding, boom, you go directly to the next one. Plyometric training can sometimes be hard though for people who need modifications or have hard joints because those high intensity moves cause pain. So if you're wanting to look into more plyometric training, but your joints maybe are giving you some trouble, I would suggest getting a personal trainer so then they teach you the modified versions of those so you can properly work your way up. Then let's talk about flexibility training, our last one. Flexibility training improves your range of motion around a joint. So this is going to be your mobility factor that you're also talking about. Yoga, Pilates, those are super good options as well. Flexibility training, there could be days that you focus solely on this, but every workout that you do generally should include some type of flexibility training. Now, if that's your cool down, if that's your warm up, if that's kind of the motions that you're going through for some of your exercises. Today we cover topics on women's sports, when to start introducing those kiddos to athletics, exercises, different types of sports, and then the 7 different types of training methods you can use to program your own workouts in the gym. So thank you so much for listening.